Hi everyone, Richard here at Grand Wazoo, bringing you another video again, and it's another installment in Frank Zappa, one album at a time. And today, in the discography, we are up to the Grand Wazoo. So I have two copies of the Grand Wazoo, the original on the Blue Label Bazaar. And then I also have the Ryko disc edition, which was issued in 1995, I believe. So those are the two editions of it that I have. This was part of the sessions that produced both the Grand Wazoo and also Waka Jawaka. I'll have a link to the video about Waka Jawaka in the Down Under, in which I also have some other information about that era to, provide a little bit of context about what was going on. So the Grand Wazoo and Waka Jawaka were all recorded together during sessions that occurred in April and May of 1972. And originally, the Grand Wazoo was going to be released first, but as it turned out, Waka Jawaka was released in July of 1972, and then the Grand Wazoo was released in November of 1972. Now, you'll notice with Waka Jawaka, we have a very simple cover on the back. We just simply have a photo of Frank, with the credits. But when we get to the Grand Wazoo, this is a much busier cover. I mean, there's a lot going on in the front. And then there's a lot going on here on the back. And then this is a gatefold, whereas the other one is not. We have the story. The legend of Cletus, Auritus, and the Grand Wazoo. So, right, there's a bunch of stuff going on, and there's a story that Frank had created that he actually considered turning into a film. Frank had a lot of ideas that he wanted to also work in the film medium. But this is a big band. This is a big orchestra. I mean, you can see we've got all the different players that are involved. Their photos here on the inside of the gatefold. So on one hand, there's just a lot of people to be managing in terms of a film. But the storyline is a bit thin, and to turn it into a feature film would make it difficult. So he contemplated making a short, but because of the number of personnel, etc., going on with the music, then that would make a short, too big of a project. So he just abandoned it altogether. Now, what's going on here? All right, we've got the story that's on the inside cover, really quite amusing. And it's talking about the Cletus Auritus, who is the funky emperor. And we're also talking about Uncle Meat. This is Uncle Meat. So, again, lots of project, object, conceptual continuity going on through the catalog. So on the front here, we've got Cletus Auritus blowing the mystery horn, and his army here on this side battling this other army, which is the army of mediocrities, of pedestrium. So on this side, the mighty army of the funky emperor, the Auritus army of Auritus. We've got, brass and horns, an electric guitar, And you can see they're just blasting all these notes at the musicians here of mediocrities who are playing stringed instruments. And this zither, we got a zither right there. And then we've got some other illusions going on here. We've got this camel saying quack, quack, which is a reference to Reuben and the Jets. And then, up here, because this is the original release, we've got the logo of Reprise Bazaar toppling off this column. You notice here on the Funky Emperor side, this looks like the Colosseum in Rome. And then over here, this kind of looks like Hagia Sophia, which is in Constantinople or Istanbul. And you can see just how all the notes coming from Cletus's army is just overwhelming, the other side. So this could, could be a reference in some respects to Frank's disdain of orchestras, in that, he had such difficulty working with orchestras and their union rules, etc. Created a lot of problems for him. And, but it's also, there's some representation here going on about the questions, which I'll get to in a minute. Now on the back, we have Uncle Meat in his basement laboratory, going on here. Lots of things. Here's, the Uncle Meat album. Here's a reference to the song for Calvin and his next two hitchhikers. So, where did they go? When did they come from? We've got this blueprint diagram of the doll foot as young rifle showing the Mumazan voluptuizer. A lot of other references going on here. Down, we've got these books. Here is, the rise and fall of the Third Reich. And then you see these 3 volumes here. One says, Volume 1, Swing to Sweet. Volume 2, Bebop to Ballads. And then Volume 3, Blues to Boogie. All right, you see that down in there. And this is a reference to the R&B DJ Hunter Hancock's radio show, which he would open up by saying, music that runs the gamut from bebop to ballads, swing to sweet, and blues to boogie. And while he is going through these, this list of musical genres, you have the Johnny Otis Orchestra illustrating each of the musical styles. And both Hancock and Otis are listed in that big list on Freakout, on the inside of Freakout, of the various musical influences. Various musicians and composers and people in the entertainment industry who had an influence on Frank. Also remember that Shuggie Otis was Johnny Otis's son, and Shuggie Otis played bass on during the Hot Rats sessions when I think he was only 14 or 15 years old. So, yeah, we've got a whole lot going on here. And then we've got the story inside here. And then we've got the list of, the musicians, for each of the songs. Interesting differences is that with the record, with the vinyl release, original vinyl release, side 1 opens with the song For Calvin and his next 2 hitchhikers, whereas the CD opens with the Grand Wazoo. And then we go into For Calvin. Little nuanced differences there. On the back also, you'll remember the back of the Waka Jawaka, we have the false Aurelia plant, and the false Aurelia plant makes an appearance again here, except that it has eyeballs on it now. So just a lot of other weird things. This could be the front end of Calvin's car because of the song. So the storyline, I mean, I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but the storyline basically is about Cletus and his cavalry encountering the questions. And the questions are the people in the audience. However, the questions are specifically representative of certain types of people. I'll have some more information on that in a minute, but it starts off, it says, Uncle Meat is in the basement of his secret laboratory. The lights are dim. All around the basement, mysterious wires and cables dangle over, out of, around, and through an unlikely collection of dust-covered desks, trunks, umbrella stands, and a huge maroon sofa, terminating in a fake maple bookcase like you might get if you ordered the whole Collier's encyclopedia at one time. So we've got these other references in here. He's talking about the huge maroon sofa, which did not make any visual appearance on the cover. The maroon sofa eventually is going to show up on the album, the release, One Size Fits All. Also, the reference to Collier's encyclopedia, Frank, for a very short period, sold door to door Collier's encyclopedias. All right, then it goes on. I'll read one more paragraph. Stu, which is Uncle Meat's first name, crouches malignantly near the bookcase, fumbling through a stack of books, records, newspaper clippings, religious pamphlets, and campaign buttons. He applies light friction to the rash on his throat, muttering, "Yes, yes, it's all here, every bit of it, everything I need to create my greatest masterpiece." So, it goes into the story more about the ruler, Cletus Auritus, the funky emperor and his fantastic army of unemployed musicians. And now they encounter mediocrities of pedestrian, who also has a fantastic army. And they punch it out every Monday. And he's talking about Mondays on the radio and the hit parade and Billboard, et cetera, et cetera. And so, pretty amusing story. So that's some of the background and the cover on this. Let's start talking about the songs. Now, these are all the same sessions that was Waka Jawaka and the Grand Wazoo. However, the two albums have a distinct identity. They have a distinct sound, differentiating one from the other. And while both of them are very fantastic albums, I like Waka Jawaka just a little bit better. It just appeals to me more easily than Grand Wazoo. But Grand Wazoo is nonetheless a really amazing album. In the variety of music that is put together, it's not quite as simply put together like Waka Jawaka, which I liken to the idea of like the burnt weenie sandwich, which has the doo-wop on the outside and the jazz fusion and orchestral pieces in the middle, of the tasty sandwich. And whereas with Waka Jawaka, we get these jazz fusion pieces on the outside and these almost pseudo country type songs that are, in the two songs that are in the middle. The Grand Wazoo doesn't have, in my mind, it doesn't have that kind of intentional structure in terms of the order of the songs. And clearly it may not have made all that much difference if depending on, which release you have, which one's the opening song. So we'll go with the opening song, the order that appears, on the original vinyl, and that's For Calvin. Now, the song is based on a true story, and it's kind of an interesting story. So Cal Schenkel, illustrator extraordinaire, who did a lot of the cover work and other illustrations for Frank, and a personal friend of Frank. I mean, this is all Cal Schenkel's work. And and as was alluded to, Just Another Band from LA, and then also it shows up in Uncle Meat, Cal has this 1939 Pontiac. Well, at one time, this was in 1969, his Pontiac was in the shop. So Frank lent him a Jaguar Mark IX, a 1959 Jaguar Mark IX, which has an interesting provenance. It was first owned, well, maybe not first owned, but before Frank got it, it was Captain Beefheart's car. Captain Beefheart sold it to Frank, who then gave it to Janet Neville Ferguson, who was among many of the groupies that hung out at the Laurel Canyon home, and who is most noted for her appearances in 200 Motels and the Uncle Meat film project that really never reached total fruition. So Cal borrowed the car because his car was in the shop. And while he's driving to his own home studio, he stops at a stoplight, and this hippie couple just gets in the car and gets into the back seat. They don't say anything or whatever, and Cal just drives, and if you got to look at this car, all right, to understand what this Jaguar Mark IX looks like, the 1959. It appears in Breakfast at Tiffany's, okay, with the what's that? Patricia O'Neill, when she's getting out of that, she plays the rich woman. And she gets out of that car. I believe that's the car that's in the film. It also, you can see the 1959 Mark IX in the 2016 film X-Men Apocalypse. And if you're at all familiar with the series A Place to Call Home, it's an Australian period series, really quite good. That's what they're driving in that series. That's a 1959 Jaguar Mark IX, and the one that Frank had or bought from Captain Beefheart is white. It's a white one. So anyway, yeah, Cal's driving a car, and these hippies get into the backseat, never say anything or whatever. They just rode along with him to his studio. And, he went into his studio, and they just stayed in the car for a while. And then they left to go get some sandwiches. And then they brought the sandwiches back and got back into the back seat and ate the sandwiches. And then after a while, they just left. So that's what this song is about, and that's what is being alluded to, here. Where did they go? When did they come from? We think of, where did they come from? No, it's when did they come from? Interesting. All right, so then we go into the song The Grand Wazoo, which is the opener on the CD. And it opens up with this really scrumptious guitar solo, which, it's a Frank Zappa guitar solo, but he's playing it on an acoustic guitar through a wah-wah. The slide guitar solo that happens later on electric slide guitar is actually Tony Duran and not Frank playing that solo. It also has really good solos by Bill Byers on trombone, and then Sal Marquis is doing a trumpet solo. He has a mute in the trumpet, and then also Don Preston has a mini moog solo. The song Grand Wazoo had lyrics to it, and the vocal rehearsals of the lyric version had been released on Joe's Dommage under the titles "It Ain't So Real, So What's the Deal" and Think It Over Some More. But there doesn't appear to be any record of Frank ever performing a vocal version, of the Grand Wazoo. Then we go into the next song, which is Cletus Auritus Auritus, which has it's the origin of the funky emperor's name, and it comes from, Frank was saying, he was observed by others to say, he'd say, alrighty, and this probably came from a 1954 song by Big Joe Turner, including the song Well Alright, but in some other songs he would also do that. He would say, well alrighty, well already, so that may be where it came from. And then that's the mystery horn is being played, which you can see here, the mystery horn, which I believe is a tenor sax, however, that the melody is pitched, it's called a C melody saxophone, which I believe is going to be a tenor sax that is, because it has the kind of the bend of a tenor sax, but it's tuned or pitched, maybe during the recording process, a whole step higher than a tenor. Tenor saxophones tend to be in the key of B flat, and then, this is in C. So that it's a kind of a silly song because the only vocals is dum 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 dum, just a lot of nonsense kind of things, but it's very kind of, grand and pompous, because it is Cletus Auritus Auritus, the funky emperor. Then we go into the song Eat That Question, which is probably my favorite song. It's got a crazy good hook. It's like, if I can repeat it, it's da da dun 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 da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun dun. Just this great hook that's going into it. It opens with George Duke on electric piano, and then and it eventually moves into that really excellent hook. Now, it originally might have been called Eat That Christian. This is where we're talking about, but Frank changed it to question, because the questions are the people in the audience for mediocrities. And Frank described these questions as a grotesque cult of masochistic ascetic fanatics who don't like music. And this was a theme that he played around with, throughout his career, especially during this period of his career that is coming up, culminating with Joe's Garage. And in the story here, it talks about them when Cletus is speaking to this crowd of questions. Again, there's some other allusions in here where he's calling out to them if there are any out in the audience who have any musical talents or whatever, and only a few will raise their hand, and then they come up on stage to join. Cletus and the Funky Emperor and his horn players. You know, this was something that Frank did during live shows, that he would, audience participation. This could be kind of allusion to that, because he had this notion that, people will do anything. And so he would call people up on stage, for like dance contests or things like that. And basically he was bringing them up on stage to make fun of them and mock them. But, hey, a lot of them were like really trashed and didn't care. But anyway, the questions, these fanatics, unquestioning fanatics who don't like music, in the story about Cletus Auritus Auritus, they get fed into this giant tank of UDT, which stands for undifferentiated tissue. And then they become destroyed or something like that. Interesting, this is also an allusion to William Burroughs, the entire asshole section of the book Naked Lunch. So the undifferentiated, tissue. So in 1979, it's reported that Frank met William Burroughs and actually discussed with him his wish to do a musical version of Naked Lunch. Obviously, that didn't happen, and I have no idea what William Burroughs' reaction was to that idea and where it went from there, other than obviously not into an actual finished piece. But that was kind of interesting. And then the song closes. You can't really hear it unless you're really listening for it, and maybe with some headphones, or maybe if you have it really loud. But the song is closing with this gong, which is, someone's banging on the gong toward the end there. And the interesting thing was, this was added while they were mixing, and they were not in a recording studio. It was a mixing studio. And so Frank wanted to have this gong added, this gong overdub. But they couldn't do it because they didn't have access to a performance studio. So what they did is they got a gong and they put it in this bathroom, this tiled bathroom that was next to the mixing booth. And they had this girl just banging on the gong for the close of the song. She apparently had a wonderful time doing it. And, then it fades out. A little interesting bit there with that. But yeah, it's probably one of my favorite Zappa songs. I mean, Eat That Question is just, I just love that. Funky, strong, crazy good hook. And then the the album closes with Blessed Relief, which appears to have never been performed live. It's a very moody jazz, blues, trumpet, Sal Marquis with the trumpet. It almost kind of harkens back to the era of, the mid 50s to late 50s jazz, particularly, like Miles Davis, perhaps, in that very much a kind of an homage back to that sound. And it is a really nice closer overall for the record. So yeah, that's the Grand Wazoo. We are, oh gosh, what release number is this? Let me quick check here. So Grand Wazoo is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's number 16. Official result number 16. And then we're going to get into we're going to be moving into a period of probably some of the strongest material that Frank put together following this. But again, yeah, the Grand Wazoo. Hope you enjoyed this. Leave a comment in the down under about your thoughts. You know, what are your favorite tracks on this? And I hope you like this. And please remember to always pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.